don't think Michael Fassbender blinks in this movie. After a while, I was like, wait a minute, has he blinked yet? Which is something that we never think about when watching a film, if the character's actually blinking. But like Michael Fassbender, he's got them big old peepers. He's got those big old eyes are just like, just constantly staring at you, which he's used to great effect in a lot of his other performances, where he's also played a lot of other disturbed characters.
Hello, and thank you for checking out the video. I just want to let you know that I not only create content on my YouTube channel, Class on the Glass, but I'm also on Twitch, where I review movies, cartoons, and TV shows live, while also playing single-player games and multiplayer games. I also have a Patreon, where subscribers have access to hundreds of video and audio commentaries for films and cartoons, as well as podcasts and videocasts. In the meantime, thank you again for watching, and enjoy the video.
But now, my friends, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the next part of my show, and that is my review for David Fincher's The Killer, his latest film. And for those that need a bit of a background chat, synopsis, if you will, the film focuses on a cold and methodical hitman who accepts a seemingly mundane and routine contract, but a small mistake causes a cascade of events in which the hitman needs to eliminate his former employers one by one by one. Now, before getting into the review itself for this film, which has been very divisive. I didn't really know a lot about this movie going into outside the trailer, but I was curious to see what the reactions were. And man, there are definitely like two different camps on this particular picture. But I do want to kind of talk about my overall thoughts on David Fincher as a filmmaker and just his filmography. I'm a huge David Fincher fan, which I feel like most people certainly are. Obviously, it came to prominence in the 1990s with films like Seven and Fight Club, and of course before then he did Alien 3, which again a lot of people still blame him for that movie. That movie was not his fault in any capacity. Look up the history of the making of Alien 3, which I actually encourage people to do so. It's fascinating. It really is interesting history. Just all the different ideas they had. The marketing didn't know what they wanted to do. They were marketing the movie before they even knew what it was going to be. Like, it's really interesting. And he was just, before then, he was like, he did music videos, he did commercials, and that was his first big project. And the studio just abused him, took advantage of him, and also a lot of other people on that movie, too. And the main villain of Alien 3 was 20th Century Fox. It was not David Fincher, it was not Sigourney Weaver, it was not any of those supporting actors and things, people that worked on that film. It was 20th Century Fox was the villain. So I don't even, and he's even said, like, it's my worst movie, I'm sorry. It's like, dude, you don't even have to apologize. Like, I don't think a single soul blames David Fincher, and if you do, come on, man, you gotta let it go. So really, he came to prominence in the 1990s with stuff like Seven and Fight Club, and has had a pretty fantastic career. Like, I have seen the majority of his filmography. At this point, I've only seen the only movie of his I have not seen is the one he did a couple years ago called Mank. I haven't seen that film. But, with The Killer, I've seen the majority of his work, and, he's made some of my favorite films of all time. The Social Network, to me, is one of the greatest films of the previous decade. Might even be my favorite, to be perfectly honest, Chad. It's a very timely movie, one which I actually hope gets a sequel someday. And, of course, Gone Girl is amazing, too. Love that. Went into that film not even knowing, what it was. I just knew it was directed by David Fincher and had Ben Affleck. Outside of that, no idea. It was a very interesting viewing experience because I just hadn't seen any marketing for the movie, which is kind of rare, especially nowadays. Really, there's only one of his films. I'm even a fan of Panic Room, and I like The Game. I actually quite like that movie. Really, the only film of his, which I don't think it's a bad movie. It's just one that I don't know. I was left with not really that many feelings towards it, which was The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which I know a lot of people really enjoyed, but I don't know. I just wasn't really emotionally affected by it. It's very different from the original short story, which I'm not particularly overly fond of that either. It just felt very schmaltzy to me, which was very unlike a lot of his work, which is, very grounded and realistic and, gritty, But for the most part, I think he's a great filmmaker, and I'm always interested to see what he's going to be doing next. He is very, very consistent with his films. And I was interested in this movie for The Killer, especially after just reading and hearing about how divisive this film is. And, I'll say this. The most important thing that I need to get across to you guys, and I think to potential viewers of this film, is that this is not like the typical hitman action movies that we've seen for the past several decades. It's not as bombastic as John Wick or as mainstream and commercial as something like James Bond or Jason Bourne, like those films. To me, it's a glimpse into the very grounded and controlled and almost mundane life of a professional assassin, and all the boredom that goes along with that, which there might be in a profession like that. You know, Michael Fassbender plays the character that we only know as the killer. I don't think we even learn his real name in the movie. I don't think that's mentioned once. Possibly an alias at some point, but not a real first or last name. He is simply the killer. I would describe his character as that of a reptile. He's manipulated his own nature in such a way to be extremely methodical and cold to a fault. He follows like a specific set of rules for himself and follows this process to be relatively very successful in his chosen field, which is murder. This, again, has caused him to be seemingly emotionless, to the point where he doesn't even blink. I don't think Michael Fassbender blinks in this movie. After a while, I was like, wait a minute, has he blinked yet? Which is something that we never think about when watching a film, if the character's actually blinking. But like Michael Fassbender, he's got them big old peepers. He's got those big old eyes are just like, just constantly staring at you, you know, which he's used to great effect in a lot of his other performances, where he's also played a lot of other disturbed characters. But because he just doesn't blink in any of his scenes, that's why I consider him to be like more lizard-like than human. I honestly expected his tongue to come out suddenly and just start, you know, wetting his eyes, each one, to keep them nice and moisturized, honestly. You know, what they kind of show up in the movie, especially in the beginning, the first third of the film, you know, he will watch a target for days on end. He'll learn their routines and their behavior, and then later on he'll exploit those things to perform the hit. You know, it's a no frills process that a lot of people might not enjoy very much, or even I think in a lot of cases, and I've seen this, consider kind of boring and dull. But it was interesting just because, you know, he's monologuing a lot. And, you know, we really get inside like what his mind is and why he's choosing to do this specific thing and that specific thing. It's like, you know, at one point in the film, he's in Paris, and he is presenting himself off as this specific type of tourist. And you're thinking like, okay, whatever. What does that matter? Well, he'll break it down for you. Like I'm from this country, and people feel this way about people from this specific country, and they won't approach me in that way, and that's why I made this choice. And it's like, okay, like he's figured this stuff out. Like he, again, going back to his like really methodical nature, his research really just portrays himself, at least initially. I was like, wow, he's like really competent. He's like a really competent character in the film, at least initially. You know, and again, I'll tell you this much. Now, that's not to say, despite like some people saying this movie is obviously boring and dull, that's not to say that the film doesn't have some terrific dramatic sequences and even action scenes. The plot of the movie has him botch a job that he's on, and something personal to him, perhaps like the only personal thing to him in his life, is threatened, and he pretty much goes on this mission to eliminate his clients to erase any future threats. He's not going in guns a-blazing or having multiple shootouts. Again, this is not John Wick. You know, it's mostly him working his way up the food chain and of people who hired him and coldly torturing and then murdering people to reach the top. And what's so kind of cool about these people is they're not like, some are like, oh, well, you're like of course you look like a stereotypical bad guy, but then there's other characters who are just a bunch of schmucks. They're a bunch of bureaucrats and they have families and they're just doing their things, and we got caught up in this thing, but it's like, whatever, no one's gonna really get hurt, but and that's interesting to see. They're not all Michael Fassbender, you choose to oppose us, well, you will die, and they send off all their henchmen to go fight him, and they all have like razor brimmed bowling hats and laser watches. Like, no, they're just a bunch of middlemen and middle women who are just like, I don't know what's going on. I just, kind of fudge some numbers sometime. Like, Vendor's like, too fucking bad. Snap your neck. That's what will happen. And that's kind of cool. I kind of like that. I really like that. And again, it always makes you feel like, oh yeah, he's going to get revenge. But then the vengeance he's getting is not really fulfilling, at all. Because it's like, oh God, these are just kind of like regular people. And they might have like made a mistake. But I don't know, they all deserve to fucking die, And so that makes him so much more reptilian. It makes him so much more alien. A lot of people compare his performance to like that of an alien. Just like, he's just not human, which is cool. And I actually like that. But, going, back to it, other than like, systematically going up the food chain, you do have some really cool like thriller-esque action scenes. There's a fantastic but very grounded action sequence in a house, like set in Florida, that involves like numerous household objects that become convenient weapons. It's brutal, it's bloody, it's very gory, but it never once becomes like overly stylized or camp, which I like those things. Believe me, Chad. I mean, I love action films. Grew up on tons of 80s action movies and the 90s and stuff. But the way in which it approaches like this specific sequence is like, oh, like all I'll say is there is a chair leg, and that chair leg goes in a place it should not go. But it goes I'll tell you, Chad, it goes in a hole. It goes in a hole, Chad. I'm like, oh God. And you don't want to go up that specific hole. It's the last thing you need, especially because it's so pointy and sharp now because it's been thrown around the room, but it went up a hole. That's all I'm going to say. Outside of like Fassbender's performance, which again he's really good in the movie, we have several other actors who I think are doing a very good job. You might not recognize all the names that I'm about to say, but we have Charles Parnell, who I think he has a name in it, like Hodges or something. He's just the lawyer, and he's kind of like the middleman. He's like the killer's handler, and he poses as a lawyer. You've seen him pop up in tons of TV shows and movies. He was most recently he was actually in The Mandalorian, I think. He was in The Mandalorian, and he was also in Barry. He pops up here. He has a fantastic scene with Fassbender in which Fassbender is interrogating him. One, it just helps that, Charles Parnell, he's a great conversationalist, great when it comes to, you give that man dialogue, he can sell it. He just has a particular type of cadence and voice that like really works for me. I was like, oh, yeah, this is good. And, it's all I'll say is it's a torture scene. And it goes a certain way that's like, oh, that you kind of don't expect it to. But I really liked his stuff in the movie. And then Tilda Swinton, who, is kind of like one of those unsung actors, is like, oh yeah, Tilda Swinton, like we don't, she's always great, and she's very good here. But we don't often, when people like ask you like, who are some of the best working actors today? People bring up this name or this popular person or that popular person, right? He, she. But like Tilda Swinton's like really brought up. And I think it's just because of the fact that she just plays such weird characters. But because of that, it's what makes her really interesting. And like she plays this aging assassin. I think they just refer to as like the expert. And she has a really good sequence with Michael Fassbender in this movie. And, they make sure to have her stand out. I mean, Tilda Swinton has very defining features. I think it'd be nice that she has very defined features that stand out. But they give her, like, the specific haircut where it's like, well, that's her. It has to be her. She's the only one that has that hairstyle in this restaurant. So go. And their conversation in the movie is like really good, and you love that because it's also it's in this world of assassins, which again, it's not like over the top. It's not like John Wick. It's not full of color and like all these like super exaggerated personalities, right? There's no one that has like a like a giant fucking like laser hand or whatever, or someone who has like nipple guns. I don't know. Pick whatever, unique ability you want to. It's just these two assassins that have been doing this for a long time. And it's almost like it's like two lizards. It's two lizards coming across each other, and they're trying to figure each other out. And they're taking occasional moments to like exploit each other's weaknesses and poke and prod, and then attack. And I really like what they did with her in this movie. And her and Michael Fassbender have fantastic chemistry. It's very tense scenes. Again, between Charles Parnell and Fassbender, and Tilda Swinton and Fassbender. Those were great. In regards to the look of the film, it's very reminiscent of Fincher's previous works. He likes to use a lot of greens and yellows and blues in his movies, and that's very much the case here. It helps make the world, in my opinion, appear to be more grounded and realistic, and even it's at times like quite sterile. I feel like you can look at a lot of Fincher's filmography and like how he like shoots like certain locations. It's almost like, it's not like in the way that like Zack Snyder like desaturates it and it's like, okay, whatever, it's like overly stylized. Like the way in which he is able to like almost strip the natural color out, but then impose like the green and the yellow and the blue in his scenes. I just really like that. It makes it almost feel like Alien-esque, like it's natural, but it's unnatural at the same time. And like, for example, he'll make like there's several settings in this movie, and we're in a tropical environment for a portion of the film, and he even like makes that like jungle-esque environment like more muted and aesthetically depressing. And just his lighting across the board is fantastic. Both with the obviously the more stylized lighting and also the natural lighting that he's using. It's really good. I thought that was great. Now, I think the major aspect of this movie that will most likely divide a lot of people is the pacing. A lot of movies this year have numerous pacing issues, chat. But for this film, it is methodically slow at times, and its no frills approach might not work for a lot of viewers, including, action fans who prefer the diehards, the face-offs, and the current dominant action movie of our day, which I think is like the John Wick films, the John Wick series, honestly. It's going to be divisive for that specific reason. But if you go in knowing that and expect, look into kind of this just mundane but still quite scary world of professional assassins and murderers, I think you might end up liking this movie more than you don't. But you do not go into that thinking like, I'm going to go see a cool action movie with Michael Fassbender where he's doing the same things as Keanu Reeves does in John Wick. That's not what this movie is. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's more of like a psychological analyzation of this murderer as he messes up, which he says I never do, but he did. And now he has to pay for it. But it's not like you're gonna get back at the bad guys. It's like, no, he's a monster. he's a horrible human being, if you want to consider him a human. He's more of a reptile, an alien reptile. But it's quite good. I wouldn't rank it especially high in my personal favorite David Fincher movies. But there's a lot of great stuff here, and it's nice to see just a really awesome, just a fantastic performance by Michael Fassbender. Especially since we haven't seen him in a while. Like I remember he was like popping up in so many things, certainly in the 2010s. But I don't know, I want to say like, 2018, 2019, he kind of disappeared. I think because of the pandemic. I get the sense that he's like, well, this is happening, so I'm just going to take some time off from myself, and that is cool because in a way, what ends up happening is we miss him. We miss seeing him in some films. And plus, he did make some bad movies. Not that he was bad in them, but, there were some bad projects. Like, the latter X-Men films, like Apocalypse and stuff. And Phoenix. I think he did something else that I didn't particularly like, really. Assassin's Creed. Yeah. So, yeah, listen, he's a great actor, but he doesn't always pick the best projects. But he has picked some great projects before, obviously. And the Snowman, Jesus. It's all coming back. It's all come back to me now. So, you know what? It was probably really smart of him to take some time off and go like, I have made some bad movies, and I need to reassess. I'm going to come back, going to work with a great director, and I'm going to give a really cool performance. And I think that's what he does here. And, you know, if you go into the movie with that in mind and know that this is going to be a more slower pace, more methodical type of thriller, and not an action movie, I think you're going to get a lot out of it. I think there's some like really good conversations. There's some really good interrogation scenes. And there is some really well-crafted action sequences in here. They're just not like every other, you know, scene. You know, there's only a few. And I really liked it for that. So, yeah, I recommend it. I don't know if it's going to be in like my top 10 this year, but I'm like, you know what? This is pretty solid. This is pretty good. I like this movie quite a bit since I adjusted my expectations as to what I was going to see. But I'm actually curious to hear from other people because, again, this movie is super divisive. I've had some people that are like, I've heard people that are like, oh, they're like really enjoying it, but they're like, yeah, it's good. Some people are just like, this movie fucking sucks, you know. So it's been really interesting to see, and I kind of understand when people are saying that because it's not an action movie. You know, it is slow. It's super introspective, and so I can kind of see a lot of sides to this. But I liked it more than I didn't. I actually liked it quite a bit. But what about you guys? How did you feel about David Fincher's The Killer? Let me know.
I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and I want to take the time to tell you about my Patreon, Class in the Glass, which offers hundreds of film commentaries and video reactions to numerous movies, TV shows, and cartoons. If you're a fan of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Avatar The Last Airbender, or films like Aliens and Raiders of the Lost Ark, my Patreon is the platform for you. Currently, I'm doing a subathon to reach 75 subs on the platform. If we hit 75 subs, we'll be able to start voting on the next edited YouTube reaction, which will include actual clips and scenes from the movies and shows I comment over. Choose from such films as Fire and Ice, Masters of the Universe, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or Spawn. Subscribing at any tier level is appreciated, and feel free to give feedback at any time. Thank you again for watching the video, and see you next time.